Most people don't expect to die in a strange or disturbing way, but sometimes death doesn't come quietly. In this video, we'll go through 5 real cases where normal, everyday people met their end in ways that were violent, confusing, or deeply unsettling. These aren't tales from horror movies or urban legends. They actually happened. And each one proves just how fast an ordinary moment can spiral into something truly terrifying. It was December 4th, 2016, in Sao Paulo, Brazil. The air buzzed with excitement at the Recanto Beija-Flor wedding venue just outside the city in Osasco. Guests were beginning to take their seats, unaware that just miles away, the bride-to-be was preparing a surprise that was meant to take everyone's breath away. Rosemary do Nascimento Silva, 32 years old, was about to live out a fantasy she'd dreamed of for years, arriving at her wedding in a helicopter, unannounced, just as the ceremony began. Only a few people knew. It was meant to be a grand entrance, a gift of wonder for her soon-to-be husband, Uderli Damasceno, who stood waiting at the altar, completely unaware. The sky was clear when the Robinson R-44 helicopter lifted off from a nearby hangar. On board with Rosemary were her brother, Silvano, her wedding photographer, Nila Cristina Neves, 6 months pregnant, and the pilot, Peterson Pinheiro. It was only supposed to be a 15-minute flight. Rosemary was radiant, smiling, excited, her every expression captured by the camera Nila had set up to record the magical arrival. But magic has a cruel side. Roughly 20 minutes into the flight, everything changed. Out of nowhere, fog began rolling in, then rain. Visibility dropped fast, and with it the pilot's ability to navigate. What started as a peaceful, joyful ride turned into a silent storm of confusion. The footage showed the mood shift in real time, Rosemary's joy giving way to concern as alarms began to sound. The camera shook. Passengers screamed. The helicopter was spiraling. Peterson tried to regain control. He fought against the whiteout conditions, trying to guide the overloaded aircraft through a wall of fog and trees. But it was too late. Less than a mile from the venue, the helicopter plunged into a forested area. The crash was instant, brutal, fatal. Rescue teams arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do. All 4 on board had been killed on impact. Back at the wedding venue, no one knew what had happened. Hundreds of guests waited patiently, chatting, smiling, expecting the bride to appear at any moment. Only 6 people knew Rosemary was supposed to arrive by air. When the minutes began to stretch and there was no sign of her, unease crept in. Still, no one imagined the truth. Then a phone call came. The helicopter had taken off on schedule. Something was wrong. Not long after, word spread of a nearby crash. At first, no one made the connection, but once the details started lining up, the location, the timing, the flight path, everything stopped. The celebration fell into silence. Uderli was still standing at the altar, waiting for his bride, when someone pulled him aside, and then the moment shattered. Rosemary was gone. The woman he was about to marry, the love of his life, had died just moments before she was meant to walk down the aisle. What was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives had turned into a nightmare, one so cruel it didn't seem real. More than 300 guests had gathered, none of them knowing why the ceremony had been canceled. Some waited in confusion, others had already begun to suspect something terrible had happened. And when the truth finally broke, the shock rippled through the crowd like a wave of ice. Investigators later discovered that the helicopter had been approved for use until early 2017, but it wasn't supposed to carry more than 3 passengers. That day, there were 4, and combined with the weather, it proved too much. They believe the helicopter clipped a tree just before the crash, its path obscured by fog. The visibility had dropped so low, the pilot never saw what was coming. In the days that followed, video from the flight was reviewed by authorities. Footage no one ever expected to become part of a tragedy. You can see it all unfold. The smiles, the excitement, the shift, the panic, the helplessness, and then nothing. Questions were raised. Why didn't they turn back when the weather changed? Why was the aircraft allowed to carry more people than it was built for? Could any of it have been prevented? Rosemary's dream never had the chance to come true. What was meant to be a magical entrance became the final chapter of her life.
2 British men and their Russian guide died while on a fishing expedition in Russia's Murmansk region on Sunday morning after being struck by their helicopter's rotor.
It was Sunday morning in 2013, deep within the Arctic Circle. Eurocopter EC-120 descended toward the frozen wilderness of Russia's remote Kola Peninsula. This wasn't just any destination. It was a secret haven for the world's wealthiest fishermen, where people paid thousands to cast lines into pristine rivers under untouched skies. On board were three men: Rupert Beaumont, a 69-year-old retired London lawyer, Mark Robertson, also 69, a fine art dealer, and their 53-year-old Russian guide, Alexander Tushnikov, an experienced Arctic expedition leader. For Rupert and Mark, this was the trip of a lifetime. Rupert, once a key figure in the Barings Bank scandal fallout, had traded courtrooms for calm waters. His son, James, was flying just behind them in a second helicopter. Everything had been meticulously arranged. The Eurocopter was chosen for its modern safety features. It was June, peak salmon season. Conditions were ideal. But the Arctic doesn't care for perfect plans. The pilot, Alexander Shabalin, a 25-year veteran, began descent near the Rinda River, beside a high-end fishing lodge. The terrain looked stable. It wasn't. As the skids touched down, one wheel sank into the marsh. The aircraft tipped sharply. Rotor blades, still spinning, dropped low, too low. In a blink, the unthinkable happened. Rupert, Mark, and Alexander had just stepped out, likely stretching their legs. Then the blade swept through them. There was no time to react. All three died instantly. From above, James watched it happen. The sudden tip, the chaos, the silence that followed. His father was gone before he even landed. Photos later showed the helicopter crumpled on its side, rotors twisted and bloodied, white snow stained red. The peaceful camp transformed in an instant. The pilot survived with minor injuries and radioed for help, but it was already too late. At first, there was talk of mechanical failure or weather, but soon focus shifted. Did the pilot misjudge the ground, try to lift off too soon? Russia's investigative committee launched a full inquiry. Conflicting witness statements and Shabalin's own account raised suspicion. A criminal case was opened. If found responsible, the pilot faced up to 10 years in prison. One report suggested the victims were struck not while landing, but during an attempted takeoff. Either way, the soft ground had betrayed them. Rupert wasn't just a vacationer. He was a revered legal mind. Friends called him sharp, kind, and generous. Mark was a quiet but respected figure in the art world. Their guide, Alexander, was beloved in the fishing community and trusted by international travelers. And then, all three were gone. The British Foreign Office confirmed the deaths. Rupert's wife, Susie, flew from Australia to Russia to be with their son. The grief was immeasurable. The Kola Peninsula had become a go-to destination for elite anglers. Remote, pristine, and only reachable by air. But that same remoteness came with risk. On that Arctic morning, in a place meant to offer peace, 3 lives were erased by a single misstep.
The first bodies have been found in the search for survivors of a plane crash in Chile. However, it is thought unlikely anything other than bodies will be taken from the sea near the Juan Fernandez Islands to the west of Chile. 21 people are thought to have perished, including one of the country's best-loved television personalities.
It was September 2nd, 2011 in Chile. Millions of adults were tuned in to Cale 7, one of the country's most beloved game shows. Then, without warning, the screen went black. And then, a serious-looking news anchor appeared. Her face was pale, her voice cracked. What she said next froze an entire nation. A Chilean Air Force aircraft had vanished off the coast of Robinson Crusoe Island. On board were 21 people. Among them, Felipe Camiroaga. The name alone sparked disbelief. Felipe wasn't just a television host, he was Chilean television. Charismatic, warm, effortlessly funny. He brought light into living rooms every morning on Buenos Dias a Todos. He was more than famous. He was trusted, loved, a part of everyday life. But now he was missing. The plane, a Casa C-212 Aviocar, had left Santiago earlier that day. It wasn't a luxury flight. It was a mission of purpose. Camiroaga, along with journalist Roberto Bruce, a team of TVN crew members, and businessman Felipe Cubillos, were heading to Robinson Crusoe Island to document rebuilding efforts after the devastating 2010 earthquake. They were going not for spectacle, but for service, to shine a light on resilience. The weather was brutal, heavy rain, relentless wind. The pilots tried twice to land. Each time, they were forced to pull up. On the third attempt, the aircraft vanished. At first, there was hope. Maybe they made an emergency landing. Maybe the plane had gone off radar but survived. Fishermen and locals joined the search, clinging to possibility. But as the hours passed and no signal came, the truth began to harden into something unbearable. There would be no rescue. There were no survivors. In Santiago, the newsroom at TVN fell into stunned silence. Anchors fought back tears. Producers sat motionless, their hands hovering over equipment they couldn't bring themselves to touch. These weren't just co-workers. These were friends, family, a part of the fabric of their lives. All across Chile, candles were lit. Flowers lined the sidewalks. People wept openly on the street, unable to believe the faces they had grown up with were gone, just like that. And then, another revelation. Something so chilling it seemed torn from a novel. A memory card was recovered from the wreckage in November, wrapped inside a water bottle. Photographer Romina Irarrázaval, one of the passengers, had taken photos during the flight, 409 in total. But it was the last few images that left people breathless. One showed the cabin floor, feet, bags, shadows. The next, rising water pressing against a window. Her last act had been to protect the card, sealing it in plastic and placing it in a bottle. A final message from the deep, proof of their final moments. A silent goodbye. Investigators concluded that the aircraft had been overwhelmed by turbulent winds during its final descent. A wide turn at dangerously low altitude gave the pilots no chance to recover. The plane broke apart on impact. The ocean swallowed the wreckage. The shock was immeasurable. Chile hadn't just lost a few public figures. It had lost something deeply personal. The familiar smile of Camiroaga on morning television, Roberto Bruce's steady voice, the warmth, the laughter, the optimism, they were gone. In the days that followed, vigils swept across the country. Outside TVN's headquarters, mourners gathered in silence, candles flickering beneath posters and handwritten letters. The grief was collective. It was national. For once, Chile wasn't divided by politics or region. It stood united. In sorrow, weeks turned into months. Families recovered what they could. Bodies, belongings, memories. But the hole left behind could never truly be filled. The crash didn't just take lives. It shattered a sense of connection, of comfort, of daily companionship. These were not distant celebrities. They were familiar voices, morning rituals, childhood heroes, and suddenly they were memories. To this day, the tragedy of the Casa C-212 crash remains one of the darkest moments in Chilean history. A wound that never quite healed, but somehow, amid the sorrow, something else endures, something stronger. It was December 14th, 1982, in Rio de Janeiro. Maria Arenalda da Silva, just 23 years old, cradled her baby daughter Danubia as she stepped into the television studio, her arms trembling not from nerves but from exhaustion, physical, emotional, and spiritual. Her 9-month-old was dying, and no one had listened. For months, Maria had wandered the city, desperate for help. She'd gone to Pedro Ernesto, Souza Aguiar, any hospital that might take them in. Her daughter was suffering from a rare and vicious eye condition that caused her to bleed, but all she heard was excuses. We're full. No beds. We don't know how to treat this. Danubia's condition worsened with every passing day. Maria had run out of time and out of faith in the system. So she turned to the only place left, television. O Povo na TV was no ordinary show. It thrived on chaos. Hosted by Wilton Franco, Wagner Montes, and others, it claimed to expose injustice and corruption, but it also blurred the line between help and exploitation. Its audience tuned in for drama, and Maria hoped that drama might finally force someone to act. She arrived at the station around 11 a.m., waiting through the noise and bustle until her name was finally called. At 1:40 p.m., she stepped onto the stage, cameras already rolling, and gently lifted her daughter into view. Danubia's face was swollen. Her tiny body barely moved. With a trembling voice, Maria told her story, the hospitals that turned her away, the nights spent fearing she'd wake to find her baby cold beside her. The hosts listened, appearing sympathetic. They condemned the public healthcare system and pointed fingers, but made no move to stop the cameras. And then, something happened. Or rather, something stopped. As Maria continued to plead, Danubia's body slowly went still. The audience didn't know what they were seeing at first. It was subtle, a shift in Maria's expression, the way she instinctively held her daughter tighter. But in that moment, a child had died, and the show went on. The hosts didn't pause. Many couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. It wasn't part of the script. It was real. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, it was far too late. An ambulance arrived, but not to save Danubia, only to take her tiny, lifeless body to the morgue. Maria, shattered, walked out of the studio, still holding her daughter, the same way she had carried her in. The show resumed its regular programming, business as usual, but the country would not forget. 3 days later, on December 17th, the Folha de S. Paulo published a scathing editorial. It didn't just criticize the hospitals, it condemned the show. It asked the questions millions were thinking. Had a line been crossed? Had tragedy become entertainment? Even as the public cried out, "O Povo na TV," didn't slow down. The scandal only grew. Less than a year later, in May 1983, one of its regular guests, Roberto Lenruber, was arrested alongside host Wilton Franco. Lenruber had claimed to be a spiritual healer, performing so-called surgeries on camera, but his treatments were fake and dangerous. His rise to TV fame had preyed on desperate people, much like Maria. The backlash became impossible to ignore. By 1984, the program was canceled for good, but the damage had already been done. What stayed with people wasn't just the show's manipulation or Lenruber's lies. It was Danubia, that fragile baby girl who died not in a hospital bed surrounded by professionals.
What started as a family cruise to celebrate an anniversary ended in a murder investigation. A husband charged with killing his wife while their children were nearby.
It was July 25th, 2017. The Emerald Princess, a towering luxury cruise ship, drifted through the icy waters of Alaska. On board were Kenneth and Christy Manzanares from Utah, celebrating their 18th wedding anniversary. Alongside them were their 3 daughters and extended family, a trip meant to mark nearly 2 decades of love and togetherness. But beneath the surface of smiles and scenic views, something was unraveling. Their cabin, D726, looked ordinary. But behind its door, tension had been simmering. Christy, 39, was known for her warmth and devotion to her kids. She'd hoped the trip might bring peace. Instead, it revealed how broken things had become. That night, Christy told Kenneth she wanted a divorce. She asked him to leave the ship at the next port. Kenneth told the girls to go to the next cabin. They obeyed, until they heard their mother scream. They ran to the balcony and saw Kenneth on top of Christy, beating her. He didn't stop, not even when the blood came. Her brother burst in, finding Kenneth dragging Christy toward the balcony. He stopped him just in time. Security arrived. Medics tried to save Christy, but the trauma to her head and face was fatal. Kenneth stood there, blood-covered and blank. One passenger recalled a barefoot girl screaming down the hallway. Some thought it was part of the night's murder mystery dinner. It wasn't. Kenneth was arrested when the ship docked. He first pleaded not guilty, then took a plea deal. He claimed Christy laughed at him and he snapped, but prosecutors pointed to a pattern: past outbursts, property damage, restraint. His lawyers cited brain injuries, bipolar disorder, and a mix of alcohol and meds. Judge Timothy Burgess called the act senseless and tragic, especially with the children so close. Kenneth got 30 years in federal prison, plus 5 more of supervised release. No parole, but he never served it. Months later, he was found unresponsive in his Juneau jail cell. Paramedics couldn't revive him. He was 43. No foul play was suspected, and the cause of death was never disclosed. The Emerald Princess continued sailing. Cabin D726 was cleaned and reused. But for Christy's family, the ship became a ghost. The daughters lost both parents, one to violence, the other to a jail cell and a silent death. It was a quiet Saturday evening in 2017 in Jesenik, a small, peaceful town nestled in the northeastern Czech Republic. The kind of place where life moves slowly and people know their neighbors. That evening, a 65-year-old mother and her 45-year-old daughter were spending time at a friend's garden home. They were there to relax, unwind, and enjoy the warmth of a private sauna. It was supposed to be comforting, healing even, but it would become their final visit. They entered the sauna, just the two of them, while their host remained outside. The soft hiss of steam, the smell of wood, the heat building gradually. It was all so ordinary. Time passed, more than anyone realized, and then too much time. Their friend, growing uneasy, walked toward the sauna. Something wasn't right. She knocked. No answer. She opened the door, only she couldn't. The handle was stuck, jammed, broken. Inside, she saw them. Both women were lying unresponsive on the sauna floor. Panic erupted. Emergency services were called, but by the time help arrived, it was far too late. The two women, mother and daughter, were gone, dead from heat stroke. And the details of what had happened inside that tiny room were almost too much to bear. The handle on the sauna door had malfunctioned. It had trapped them inside. As the temperature climbed higher and higher, the women tried to escape. Evidence showed they had smashed at the small window in the door, trying to break free. Shards of glass were scattered across the floor. Towels lay in disarray, twisted and abandoned in the chaos of their final moments. They had tried, desperately, but couldn't get out. Police later confirmed the cause of death, heat stroke. They had been inside for nearly 90 minutes before they were found. The delay, just a matter of minutes, had cost them their lives. Photos released after the investigation told the story in haunting stillness. A broken door handle, twisted metal, a shattered window pane, towels that once offered warmth, now markers of a frantic attempt to survive. The scene was both intimate and devastating. The tragedy shook the town. People who knew them, people who lived nearby, couldn't comprehend how something so simple, so routine, could go so horribly wrong. A sauna, a symbol of comfort, self-care, and calm, had become a sealed chamber of unbearable heat and panic. And the questions began. Was the sauna regularly maintained? Had anyone noticed the faulty handle before? Could this have been prevented? The answers were slow to come, but the grief hit immediately. The story didn't just remain within the borders of Jesenik. It rippled outward. Across the country, even across Europe, people began to look at their own private saunas differently. Safety, once taken for granted, was now a topic of serious concern. Because this wasn't about reckless behavior. This wasn't about people making bad choices. This was about a simple mechanism, one small, overlooked flaw, leading to the slow, silent death of two innocent women. It was May 30, 2025, in northern Namibia. Bernd Kebbel, a 59-year-old German-born businessman and devoted conservationist, had come not as a tourist, but as someone who'd spent years protecting one of nature's rarest wonders, Namibia's desert-adapted lions. This was sacred ground to him. He wasn't alone. His wife, Connie, 57, was by his side, along with friends and 6 children. They traveled in 3 four-wheel drives, each with rooftop tents meant to keep them safe from predators. That night, they set up camp near the Hwaneb Skeleton Coast, a final frontier for the desert lions. The stars were bright, the silence deep. It felt like the perfect end to a long day, but death was close. Around 1:30 a.m., Bernd climbed down from the tent to use the toilet. A routine moment. But just feet away, hidden in the dark, a lioness was waiting. Her name was Charlie. She was 12, old, skeletal, starving. Her ribs stuck out like bones through paper. Once featured in wildlife documentaries, Charlie had grown desperate and had lost her fear of humans. The moment Bernd touched the ground, she pounced. Her jaws sank into his neck. She dragged him into the brush. It happened so fast, so silently, no one noticed. Until Connie woke to strange sounds. Then she heard her husband's voice, faint and terrified, followed by a growl. She scrambled down the ladder. In the dark, she saw it, Charlie dragging Bernd's lifeless body away. Without hesitation, Connie ran toward the lioness. She grabbed a metal pole and began striking her. She screamed, fought, and even tried to rip off Charlie's leather tracking collar. Another camper arrived and hit the lioness with a flashlight. Finally, Charlie backed off into the dark. But it was too late. Bernd had died almost instantly. The camp was paralyzed with fear. No one slept. The children cried. Adults sat in shock. And then, Charlie came back. She circled the vehicles, growling, pretending to charge. The group huddled inside, afraid to move. The next night, Charlie struck again, this time at a nearby camp. She shredded a tent, clawing and biting through it. Footage later showed the damage. She wasn't just hungry, she had become a threat. Namibia's Ministry of Environment launched an investigation. On June 1st, just 2 days later, they found Charlie resting under a bush. She was put down that morning. Connie later spoke publicly. She said they had come to terms with it, that she and Bernd never wanted Charlie to die. They had loved this land too deeply, but the wild had turned against them. Locals called Connie a hero, a woman who ran at a lioness and lived. A safari guide who knew them said, few people could face a lion and survive, but Connie did. Only around 60 desert-adapted lions remain in Cunene, fewer than 800 across Namibia. Their habitat is vanishing, their prey disappearing. And when desperation sets in, even sacred ground becomes deadly. Bernd had spent years trying to protect that balance. He funded conservation teams, supported researchers like Dr. Philip Flip Stander, and even had a lion named Kebbel in his honor, though it too had to be put down for safety. He also owned the off-road center in Windhoek, supplying safari gear and supporting ecotourism. After the tragedy, his children, Deer and Heidi, returned from South Africa to be with their mother. Authorities confirmed Bernd's death. Campers had tried to help, but it happened too fast. Namibia lost a protector, the desert lost a lioness, and Connie, she lost her partner, in the very place he loved most.
On the 30th of July 2008, 22-year-old carnival worker Tim McLean boarded his Greyhound Canada bus to return home to Winnipeg. He would never make it.
It was the kind of ride thousands of people take every day. a Greyhound bus making its way across the wide, quiet highways of Canada. On July 30th, 2008, that ride turned into something no one on board would ever forget. Something so horrifying it would haunt the nation for years. The bus had departed from Edmonton, heading toward Winnipeg. Among the passengers was 22-year-old Tim McLean, a cheerful, free-spirited young man who had been working at a carnival. He was heading home, sitting toward the back of the bus, earbuds in, relaxing, his head resting against the window. Just another long trip, just another night, but not for everyone. A man named Vince Lee had boarded the same bus in Erickson, Manitoba. At first, he sat near the front, quiet, ordinary. No one paid him much attention. Hours passed. Nothing seemed unusual, until Lee suddenly walked to the back and sat down beside Tim. Tim didn't stir. He had no idea the man next to him was watching him in silence. No idea the stranger was about to unleash a nightmare. Without warning, Lee pulled out a large knife and began stabbing Tim in the neck and chest. Fast, brutal. The bus erupted in screams. The driver pulled over as passengers rushed outside, horrified. But Lee didn't move. He stayed. And what he did next pushed this already savage scene into something darker. From the windows, passengers watched in horror as Lee continued attacking Tim's body. Some tried to re-enter the bus, but Lee brandished the knife, keeping everyone back. He began mutilating the body, performing acts too grotesque to comprehend. By the time police arrived, it was too late. Tim was gone, and Vince Lee, covered in blood, sat calmly and surrendered without a fight. What came next only deepened the tragedy. Lee had untreated schizophrenia. He told doctors he was hearing voices, commands from a higher power telling him that Tim was a threat. He believed he had no choice. In court, he was found not criminally responsible by reason of mental illness. Instead of prison, he was sent to the Selkirk Mental Health Center for treatment. For some, this was a story about the need for compassion and better mental health care. But for Tim's family, especially his mother, Carol Dedeli, it felt like justice had been abandoned. Her son had been taken in a way no parent should ever experience. But what hurt even more was knowing the man responsible might one day walk free. And he did. In 2015, Lee began receiving supervised day passes. By 2017, he had legally changed his name to Will Baker. That same year, a Manitoba Review Board declared him no longer a threat and granted him an absolute discharge. No prison sentence, no criminal record, no restrictions, just ongoing treatment. To many Canadians, it was a shocking decision. Carol called it a catastrophic failure of the system. How could someone commit such horror and walk away with a new name and a clean slate, while her son remained a memory? The case split public opinion. Some said those suffering from mental illness shouldn't be punished for things they didn't understand. Others believed that violence like this should never be forgiven, no matter the diagnosis. Other high-profile cases followed, like the 2022 trial of Jeremy Skibicki, where the same defense raised the same questions. Where is the line between mental illness and accountability? Can someone who kills so violently ever truly be safe again? Today, Will Baker lives somewhere out of the spotlight. Whether he's truly rehabilitated, no one knows. But one thing is certain, Tim McLean's story hasn't faded. His family continues fighting for change. They want a justice system that doesn't forget the victims, that doesn't let trauma be buried under medical reports. It was September 28, 2012. Across America, millions of viewers tuned into Fox News. What they saw was familiar in format. A high-speed police chase unfolding live in Phoenix, Arizona. Helicopter cameras followed a copper-colored sedan as it wove dangerously through traffic. But no one, not the viewers, not the anchors, not even the police, was prepared for how this would end. Inside the car was 33-year-old Jodan Romero, a man with a troubled past. He was already wanted for violating parole on a weapons charge. That morning, he had escalated his life of turmoil by stealing a car at gunpoint. Sirens soon followed. Police helicopters locked on. Ground officers tracked him cautiously, giving distance while monitoring from the air. It was tense but routine, until Romero fired shots during the chase, once at officers, once terrifyingly at the news chopper above. And yet, the broadcast continued. Romero left the city limits and veered into the empty expanse of desert west of Phoenix. The road turned to dirt, dust rose in plumes behind him, and then he stopped. The car door swung open, cameras zoomed in. Romero stepped out, alone on a barren road, and began walking. His steps were erratic, his posture unsteady. Something was wrong, very wrong. In the Fox News studio, anchor Shepard Smith sensed it. His tone shifted. "This scares me," he whispered, unease tightening in his voice. Then it happened. Romero suddenly collapsed to his knees. For a second, it looked like maybe he'd given up. Maybe this would end peacefully. But then he stood again, slowly, shakily, and reached into his waistband. The breath caught in Smith's throat. "Get off! Get off! Get off!" he shouted to the control room, panicked. He believed there was a delay, believed the producers would cut away in time. There wasn't. In a single devastating moment, Jodan Romero raised a handgun to his head and pulled the trigger. Silence followed. No music, no warning, just the raw horror of what millions had just witnessed. A man's final moment beamed into homes across the country in real time. The screen quickly cut to commercial, but the damage was irreversible. When Fox News returned, Shepard Smith's face was pale. He looked directly into the camera and apologized, his voice cracking with remorse. "We really messed up," he admitted, "and we're all very sorry." But apologies couldn't take it back. The footage had aired, uncensored, unfiltered, and it reached far beyond just the general public. Romero had 3 children, ages 9, 13, and 15. They were at school when it happened. At first, rumors swirled among classmates. Something about a man on the news. A chase, a death. That evening, the 2 older boys searched online, curious. They pressed play, and they watched their father die. The trauma was instant, crushing. They hadn't recognized him at first, but when they did, when the voice and the clothes and the walk became unmistakable, the horror set in. The younger one vomited. The older screamed. Their mother, Angela Rodriguez, found them collapsed, trembling, broken. The boys never returned to school. They couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Nightmares plagued them. Panic attacks came without warning. The video, out there forever, was like a shadow following them everywhere. Angela filed a lawsuit against Fox News, saying her children had been exposed to something no child should ever see. Her words were simple, raw. They saw their father die because someone didn't press a button in time. The public outcry was swift and divided. Some defended the network. Live news is unpredictable, they said. But others asked, at what cost? Police chases are thrilling. They boost ratings, they draw in viewers. But that day, the line between journalism and voyeurism was crossed. The question echoed across newsrooms. Should live events, especially volatile ones, be broadcast at all? Romero's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning. A reminder that even in a digital world driven by speed and spectacle, there are things that should not be shown, things that burn themselves into memory and never let go. August 23, 2010, a bright tourist bus sat parked in Rizal Park, a seemingly ordinary sight in the capital city. Inside, 25 people, mostly tourists from Hong Kong, settled in for what was supposed to be a day of sightseeing. But among them was a man whose quiet rage was about to ignite a living nightmare. Rolando Mendoza, a 55-year-old former police officer, boarded the bus with a rifle, handcuffs, and a grudge that had been simmering for months. He wasn't just angry, he felt betrayed. Mendoza had been dismissed from the Philippine National Police over extortion allegations, and he believed he had been wronged. In his mind, this was justice. He would force the world to listen. He hijacked the bus, armed and determined not to rob or harm, at least not at first, but to demand his job back and clear his name. But what began as a desperate protest slowly morphed into a blood-soaked catastrophe. With news cameras rolling and reporters circling like vultures, every terrifying moment played out live. The world watched. The passengers sat frozen in fear, and Mendoza watched too, from inside the bus. He had a television on board. He could see everything. As the hours crawled by, -11 in total, tensions frayed. Negotiators tried to keep the situation calm, and for a time it seemed to work. A few hostages were released, but time is cruel in a standoff. It amplifies fear. It unravels control. Then a mistake, one that changed everything. Mendoza's brother, Gregorio, himself a police officer, had tried to help. He begged his brother to surrender, pleaded with authorities to listen. But then, live on national television, Gregorio was arrested by fellow officers, shoved into a squad car just outside the scene. Mendoza saw it all, his last thread of hope ripped from him in real time. Something inside him snapped. Inside the bus, panic turned into horror. He shouted threats over the radio. He claimed he had harmed hostages already, and he promised more violence if he didn't get what he wanted. One hostage, Mrs. Leong, later shared how her husband had tried to protect them, tried to stop Mendoza. He was gunned down before her eyes. Still, she held on, fighting the despair for the sake of her children waiting back home. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the situation spiraled. Mendoza was watching everything. News helicopters overhead, police movements below, the creeping approach of the assault team. The media, in their race for ratings, were unintentionally feeding him tactical information. He knew what was coming. He was ready. When the order was finally given to storm the bus, the police moved in, but it was chaos. They tried to force open the back door and were met with more gunfire. Hesitation paralyzed the assault. Finally, snipers were ordered to fire. Mendoza was shot and killed, but by then it was too late. 8 hostages were already dead. Survivors emerged. Among them was the bus driver, Alberto Lubang, who had managed to escape and run to the police. His voice, ragged and desperate, rang out in the night. "Everyone is dead!" Outrage erupted almost instantly, especially in Hong Kong, where the families of the murdered tourists demanded answers, demanded justice. A formal apology came from the Philippine government, but it couldn't mend what had been broken. An inquiry followed. Philippine Justice Secretary Leila de Lima spearheaded the investigation, and what it revealed was nothing short of damning. The police were woefully unprepared. No crisis plan, no specialized team. Multiple chances to end the standoff early had been missed. And the non-stop media coverage? It handed Mendoza a tactical advantage on a silver platter. Several officers were suspended or demoted. Manila's police chief was removed. In response, the Philippine government scrambled to make changes. New training programs, new policies for hostage crises, and a specialized tourist police unit. They wanted to make sure this never happened again. But for the families of the dead, no policy could undo the nightmare.
Justice almost a decade in the making. Heather Mack has been sentenced to almost 26 years in prison.
The Oak Park woman pleaded guilty to helping kill her own mother during a vacation in Bali in 2014.
It was August 12th, 2014 in Nusa Dua, Bali. At the opulent St. Regis Resort, 62-year-old Sheila Von Wiese Mack was supposed to be enjoying a peaceful vacation with her daughter, 18-year-old Heather. But behind the silk sheets and ocean breeze, something was terribly off. Sheila wasn't just any tourist. Back home in Chicago, she was a respected figure in elite circles, the widow of renowned jazz composer James L. Mack, and someone who, despite her wealth, was fiercely protective of her daughter. And Heather? Well, Heather had secrets. She was pregnant. She hadn't told her mother everything. She didn't just bring her baggage to Bali. She brought her boyfriend. 21-year-old Tommy Schaefer arrived quietly, slipping into the resort with a business-class ticket secretly purchased using Sheila's credit card. Sheila had no idea he was coming. She'd spent months trying to separate her daughter from him, moving houses, changing routines, even uprooting her life in an attempt to shield Heather from what she believed was a dangerous relationship. But Heather and Tommy weren't ready to let go. In fact, they had a plan. The night Tommy arrived, hotel surveillance caught a tense scene in the lobby. He and Sheila arguing, their body language tight with fury. What followed wasn't impulsive. It was months in the making. Back in Chicago, Heather and Tommy had exchanged chilling text messages about killing Sheila. They'd even offered $50,000 to Tommy's cousin to find someone to carry it out. Tommy would later claim that during the argument, Sheila threatened to harm the unborn baby. "That's when," he said. He snapped. He grabbed a heavy metal fruit bowl from the room and began to strike Sheila again and again until she collapsed. Her face bloodied, her breath gone. The forensic evidence showed brutal facial injuries. Heather didn't stop him. She helped clean up. They wrapped Sheila's body in a hotel bedsheet, stuffed it into a suitcase. They had to force it shut, and in doing so, they broke her neck. They wheeled the suitcase through the pristine halls of the 5-star resort. No one suspected a thing until the blood started leaking. A taxi driver noticed it first, red seeping from the suitcase into his trunk. Alarmed, he alerted hotel staff, who quickly called the police. But by the time officers arrived, Heather and Tommy had vanished. They fled to a nearby hotel, thinking maybe they'd bought themselves some time. They hadn't. Less than 24 hours later, they were caught. People back home were stunned. Between 2010 and 2013, police had been called to the Mack household a staggering 86 times. Domestic disturbances, missing person reports. Most of them involved Heather. She'd already spent time in juvenile detention, had psychiatric evaluations, and been known to lash out violently. But through it all, Sheila never gave up on her daughter. She tried everything: therapy, structure, even isolation. And yet, on this trip, the very one meant to rescue their bond, Heather sealed her mother's fate. Sheila had been recovering from a fall earlier in the trip. She was resting, vulnerable. That's when Heather booked Tommy's flight. Hours after he arrived, her mother was dead. When the case went to trial, the revelations kept coming. Heather wasn't some manipulated teen. She had been actively involved in the planning. The motive? Some believed it was control. Others pointed to greed. Heather thought she stood to inherit up to $11 million. That inheritance would later help fund her defense. $150,000 of it, in fact. Money from Sheila's own estate. Tommy was sentenced to 18 years. Heather, surprisingly, only got 10. In prison, she thrived in ways that seemed unsettling, joining dance groups, learning languages, even working as a translator. Tommy, on the other hand, struggled, isolated, beaten, angry. In a 2019 interview, he expressed remorse. Heather didn't, at least not at first. In 2017, she posted a video in which she said she didn't regret what happened. Then, in 2021, Heather walked out of prison early for good behavior. The moment she touched U.S. soil, federal agents were waiting. She was arrested again. In court, she finally apologized to her family. Her uncle Bill said it was the first time she'd done so, but even then, he wasn't sure she meant it. Today, Heather sits in a U.S. federal prison, sentenced to 26 years. Tommy is still locked up in Indonesia, and the little girl they brought into the world, Stella, is now 10, living with Sheila's niece in Colorado. She's cut off all contact with her mother. After years of fighting, Heather gave up her claim to the inheritance. That money now belongs to Stella. It was just after 11:30 p.m. on a cold January night in 2021. The streets of Columbus, Ohio were mostly quiet. Victoria Strauss, a 23-year-old graduate student at Ohio State University, was wrapping up her night after a long day of studying. She had dreams, big ones. She wanted to become a therapist, to help people, and by all accounts she was already doing that. Her friends called her a light. Her family described her as kind, ambitious, and deeply compassionate. That night, she was parked in a downtown garage she'd used plenty of times before. Nothing unusual, just another end to another busy day. She approached the exit, rolled down her window, and reached out with her credit card to pay the fee. Then the card slipped. It was one of those small, frustrating moments. Nothing serious, just annoying. The kind of thing that happens to all of us. Victoria opened her door and leaned out to grab it, just barely out of reach. But as she stretched toward the ground, her foot hit the gas, and everything changed in an instant. The car lurched forward. The open door slammed into the toll booth with brutal force. Victoria, still leaning out, was suddenly caught between them, her head pinned with no way to move, no time to react. There were no witnesses, no screams heard, just silence as the car came to a stop, locked in place with her motionless inside. Hours passed. The garage stayed quiet, dark. The rest of the city slept, unaware that inside that car, a young woman was trapped, dying, just feet away from freedom. It wasn't until around 5:40 a.m. that a security guard doing routine checks walked past and saw her. By then, it was too late. Emergency services rushed to the scene, but Victoria was already gone. The news sent shockwaves through those who knew her. How could something so small, so seemingly harmless, lead to something so final? Authorities ruled it an accident. No one else had been involved. The car hadn't moved after the impact. There was no foul play, just a terrible, tragic chain of events. A split second, one simple mistake, and it was all over. But the story didn't end there. When the autopsy was completed, it confirmed the cause of death, blunt force trauma to the head. There were also signs of mechanical asphyxia. Her breathing had likely been restricted during the crash, but the head injury was what ultimately took her life. Then came a detail that made everything even more complicated. Victoria's blood alcohol level was 0.221-, nearly 3 times the legal limit in Ohio. She had been intoxicated. No other drugs were found in her system, but the alcohol was officially listed as a contributing factor. For some, that detail hit hard. It was unexpected, painful, but for her loved ones, it didn't change who she was. They knew Victoria's heart, her purpose, her character. They didn't reduce her to a statistic. They remembered the way she always showed up for others, even while fighting her own battles. The way she listened, the way she danced. She'd once been a cheer and dance team member at Florida Atlantic University before transferring. Dancing had always been her passion, her expression, her joy. So in the days after her death, her friends turned back to that. They honored her through movement, through tribute performances, carrying her memory in every step. At Ohio State, the university issued a statement mourning her loss. Professors, classmates, friends, they all echoed the same sentiment. Victoria had so much to give. She was just getting started. Her death didn't make national headlines. There was no sensational twist, no scandal, just a quiet, heartbreaking truth. Sometimes, life can turn on a dime. One small misstep, one slip, one unthinking moment, and the future you dreamed of disappears. Victoria Strauss had plans. She had people who loved her. She had a life she was building with care and passion. But in the still silence of that garage, all of it ended. Her story is a reminder that tragedy doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it creeps in during the most ordinary moments, when you're tired, distracted, reaching for something you dropped. And sometimes there's no warning at all.
What she doesn't know is that the show itself is in deep trouble, starting now.
It was January 11th, 2001, in Rio de Janeiro. The set of Xuxa Park was bursting with music. Nearly 300 people, most of them children, filled the studio, eyes wide with wonder as their beloved host, Xuxa Meneghel, danced and sang beneath the bright studio lights. As the closing number echoed through the studio, dancers twirling and kids clapping along, something went wrong. It started small, just a flicker of flame inside the massive spaceship prop used for character entrances. A stagehand noticed it, ran in with a fire extinguisher, expecting to put it out quickly. But instead of dying, the fire exploded to life. Plastic decorations ignited instantly, sending a plume of black, choking smoke into the air. Within seconds, the set transformed into a nightmare. Children screamed. Parents lunged toward exits. Crew members shouted, trying to guide people out, but the smoke made it nearly impossible to see. The intense heat melted parts of the set. Chaos took over. Somewhere in the madness, a little girl was seen trapped, frozen in place, stuck on a faux Ferris wheel that had been part of the playground-themed stage. And then, against all instinct, someone ran toward the fire. Xuxa's bodyguard, Leandro Nilsson, pushed through the flames. Ignoring the searing heat, he climbed the prop to reach the terrified child. The moment was pure panic. Everyone else fleeing, he moved deeper into the blaze. But he reached her, he got her down, and he carried her out as the fire raged behind them. Meanwhile, some cameras, still rolling, captured it all. The flames, the screams, the scrambling crew. Later, that footage would air on Brazilian news, and viewers across the country would be horrified to recognize the set that once symbolized joy now consumed by smoke and fire. By the time firefighters brought it under control, the studio was gutted. 26 people were injured, including 2 children, ages 7 and 10, who suffered severe burns. Another adult who'd helped with rescues was also seriously hurt. Dozens more were left physically untouched, but emotionally scarred. The laughter that had once echoed through the studio was replaced by silence. Xuxa, shaken to her core, wasn't hurt, but the pain was visible. She had dedicated her career to children, to making them feel safe, loved, and seen. Watching them panic, watching some suffer, was a weight she carried deeply. In the days that followed, she visited the injured in the hospital, sitting beside them, holding their hands. But the damage couldn't be undone. Investigators later confirmed the fire had been caused by a short circuit in the spaceship's wiring. No foul play, just faulty electrics, and a set designed more for fantasy than for fire safety. Xuxa Park never aired again. The network, Globo, canceled the show permanently. 8 episodes, already filmed, were locked away, never to be seen. The set was reduced to rubble, and Xuxa herself would never return to children's television in the same way. Something had changed. A dream had died.
A 6-year-old boy began bleeding from his nostrils and mouth and eventually died at a hospital after eating a lollipop in East China's Shandong province.
It was a quiet day in 2015 in Lujiang village. That afternoon, 6-year-old Xiao Li was doing just that, chasing his friends through the yard, caught up in a game of hide-and-seek, his world still small and innocent. Then he saw it. Lying on the ground, just near a bush, was a lollipop. It looked fresh, bright, sweet, like someone had dropped it by accident. Xiaoli didn't think twice. He picked it up, unwrapped it, and popped it into his mouth. A tiny, harmless act, something any child might do without a second thought. But that candy wasn't a treat. It was a death sentence. Xiaoli went back to playing, unaware that inside his body something terrible had begun. Minutes later, his friends heard him cry out, and then silence. They found him collapsed behind a bush. His skin had gone pale. Blood was leaking from his nose, his mouth, even his eyes and ears. They screamed for help. His father, Jin Sui, ran to him in a panic. What he found was almost too much to comprehend. His little boy gasping for breath, barely conscious, bleeding from every part of his face. Jin scooped him up and raced to Jie County Hospital. The doctors acted fast, but the poison had already invaded Xiaoli's organs, turning his blood dark. He was transferred to a larger hospital in Jining, but the damage was done. 2 days later, Xiaoli was gone. The tests confirmed the horrifying truth. The lollipop had been laced with tetramine, a chemical so toxic it's been banned in many countries for decades. In even the tiniest amounts, it shuts down the nervous system, destroying the body from the inside out. Though illegal, tetramine is still used in black market rat poison, especially in parts of China where regulation enforcement struggles to keep up with demand. But this wasn't an accident. More poisoned lollipops were found around the yard. Someone had planted them there, carefully, deliberately. Not tossed, not scattered, but placed. The candy hadn't broken, which ruled out the idea they'd been thrown over the fence. Whoever did this had walked onto the family's property. Whoever did this wanted those lollipops to be found by children. Police combed through every possible lead. Was it someone with a grudge? A neighbor with a hidden feud? A stranger with a twisted motive? Investigators examined the terrain, interviewed anyone who might have had a reason to target the family, but there were no witnesses, no camera footage. No one saw anything, and worst of all, no one was ever caught. The case stunned the village. People looked at their own front yards differently. Parents started keeping their children inside. Candy was no longer just candy. It was a question mark, a threat, an object of fear. How does a child's life end like this? Over a lollipop? The deeper tragedy is in how powerless Xiaoli was. He didn't make a mistake. He didn't do anything wrong. He saw something bright and colorful, and he did what any 6-year-old would do. He reached for it with joy. What he got instead was something no child should ever experience. What his father got was a memory no parent should ever carry. The moment your child's innocence meets someone else's cruelty. Authorities continued their investigation for years. They still do. The file remains open, but the killer, if that's even the right word for someone who does something so calculated and cold, was never found. Today, Xiaoli's death still casts a shadow over Lujiang village, and the question that lingers, who did this and why? It was February 22nd, 2025, in the quiet coastal town of San Pedro, Belize. The sun rose over the Royal Cajal Beach Resort, a luxury escape known for its white sands, turquoise waters. Kawar Nakad, 23, Imani Mala, 24, Wafi Elar, 26. They had come from Massachusetts to soak in the sun, celebrate life, and make memories together. Friends back home described them as kind, ambitious, full of laughter and light. Their flight home was scheduled for the next day. Their bags were packed, but something went terribly wrong. On the morning of February 21st, hotel staff noticed something strange. None of the women had been seen since the day before. Surveillance confirmed they had entered their suite and never left. Housekeeping knocked. No answer. The next morning, still nothing. When the staff finally entered the room, they found all 3 women unresponsive. The room was still. No signs of violence. No struggle. Just 3 vibrant lives gone. First responders arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do. The women were pronounced dead at the scene. A vacation that began in celebration had ended in an inexplicable tragedy. The news stunned everyone. Belize police launched an investigation. Commissioner Chester Williams gave a public statement mentioning that alcohol, vape pens, and gummies had been found in the room, but nothing illegal. He speculated that the women may have consumed something toxic. That explanation didn't sit right with their families. They knew these women. That theory didn't fit. An initial autopsy in Belize listed the cause of death as acute pulmonary edema, fluid in the lungs. But why? How? There were no answers. Their bodies were flown back to Massachusetts for a second autopsy as the families pushed for clarity. Weeks later, a strange twist emerged. A woman using the alias Jane had checked into the Royal Cajal on March 1st, unaware of what had happened just days before. Concerned for her safety, she called ahead. A hotel staff member named Daniel reassured her. The deaths, he said, were an isolated incident. She believed him. But on the 5th day of her stay, Jane woke up dizzy with a numb leg and blurred vision. When she stood, she collapsed. For nearly 40 minutes, she couldn't move. Back home, the symptoms lingered. Headaches, confusion, vision loss. She didn't know what had happened until she started reading about carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is a silent killer, odorless, invisible. It can leak from fuel-powered appliances and builds up fast in enclosed spaces. The symptoms matched. Jane reported her experience to the U.S. Embassy. A friend later told her that some rooms at the Royal Cajal had tested for dangerously high carbon monoxide levels, but the embassy stayed quiet. Then came another voice. A guest named Nana H. had stayed at the resort just before the women were found. Her personal carbon monoxide detector had gone off. over 400 parts per million, an extremely dangerous level. She reported it to hotel staff. Their response, confused and unprepared. Under mounting pressure, Belizean officials ran environmental tests. This time they found some rooms with readings as high as 500 parts per million, more than 10 times the maximum safe level. The danger had been real, and it had been there all along. On March 26th, the truth was confirmed. Kawar, Imani, and Wafi had died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Toxicology reports showed their blood carried over 60% carboxyhemoglobin, a fatal level. No other substances were found. The initial speculation, the assumptions, the dismissals, it had all been wrong. Their families released a joint statement filled with heartbreak and fury. How, they asked, could such a basic safety failure claim 3 young lives? How could no one have noticed? How could it take a second tragedy, nearly, for the truth to surface? The Royal Cahal Beach Resort quietly shut its doors, but the silence that killed those women still echoes. It wasn't a freak accident. It wasn't bad luck. It was preventable, and it was missed by people who should have known better.